into tonight's episode, which is, if you're on Amazon Prime in the United States, Season 1, Episode 19 of Stargate SG1, There But For the Grace of God. What are your opening thoughts on this, sir?
Again, we've talked before about how Season 1 of SG1 doesn't really have any misfires. I mean, all of SG1 to a certain extent doesn't really have many if any misfires. But the thing about this episode is that it takes a very classic trope of sci-fi, which is the alternate universe, and does exactly what the title suggests. What if you could fix a mistake, or fix address a danger to your world that you wouldn't have known about except for some little accident. That's really what all it is. Daniel Jackson accidentally goes through to another universe and witnesses the sort of unfolding Goa'uld invasion of Earth, and realizes that, hey, I can try and keep this from happening where I come from. And basically the entire episode is sort of it's got layers. It's another episode that has layers. Jack gets killed, Sam gets killed, General Hammond gets killed, Daniel in this universe is already dead. Teal'c gets blown up at the end. It's just kind of a big. It's a smorgasbord of bodies to tell a story about what is at stake in this universe, which is that the Goa'uld could invade and destroy our way of life, destroy not just our way of life, our civilization. They could wipe us out, and that's kind of what is at stake with this war against the Goa'uld that's unfolding.
Yeah. It plays what if, it gets to
good way to put
it. It gets to reset everything, but also it gets to have its cake and eat it too. And it shows what would have happened to Jack O'Neill without the input of Daniel Jackson, right? How they kind of complete each other. There's a real yin and yang to their relationship. Jack O'Neill knows when to shoot the gun. Daniel Jackson knows when not to. And, if with Jack O'Neill, every problem is a nail because all he knows are hammers. For instance, Daniel Jackson starts off the show, touches this mirror, right? Kind of in it does the Star Trek thing of the mirror universe, but it does it very much in its own way, right?
Yep.
Like it plays with the trope, turns it on its head. It's actually a mirror. He touches it and flashes into the parallel universe. And I'm so excited to get into the multiverse stuff that comes up with this mirror thing in the upcoming seasons. And then he goes home, and then he gates through, and then he's greeted with like guns, and General Hammond's a colonel, and Jack O'Neill's the general, and he's confused. He's like, "What's going on?" And then
they don't know who he is.
They don't know who he is, but he's got the SG1 dial-in thing, which presumably SG1's probably dead, right? Or like it wasn't him; it was somebody else. But we know SG1 existed in this timeline.
It's very much a what if episode, and it takes the trope that I think a lot of fiction over the years, and not just science fiction, but fiction in general, but a lot of fiction over the years has revolved around the concept of what if. And I think a lot of science fiction especially does, because that's kind of the nature of what it is. It's what if we had teleporters? What if we had spaceships that could take us to other planets in the solar system? What if we had stargates? That's kind of the crux of the entire Stargate universe, is stuff like that. But this episode takes it a step further and says, what if there was a way to visit another parallel universe and see what was different? And in this case, it's everything's worse because Daniel Jackson wasn't around to help them do these things that prevented the Goa'uld from showing up and just wiping us out unopposed.
And there's a piece there where Daniel Jackson talks to Jack O'Neill, or General O'Neill, in this parallel world, and says, "Hey, you convinced the guy named Teal'c to turn on the Goa'uld, and that way we could help liberate his world." And Jack O'Neill says, "What are we can't really help him. We're almost dead here." But he tries that gambit anyway, right? However, he tries it after they send a nuke to Chulak, where Teal'c is from. And so in the other world, Daniel Jackson would have been able to convince General O'Neill to not send the nuke. But in this world, he sends a nuke because every problem is a nail. All he has are hammers. And
multi-megaton hammers.
And by the time he tries to like convince Teal'c to turn, you could see where Teal'c might have turned if they hadn't just nuked his planet. And so he says, fuck them, and then just kills everybody.
Yep.
Which I'm like, kind of fair. And you see so much of my morality, I could see that was just established from this show. And I'm like, because they're teaching the benefits of mercy and the price of sort of blind rage and letting your bloodlust get to you, right? It's a lot of it's about temperance, it's about moderation, and I think you brought this up a few episodes ago when Daniel Jackson in a season 6 episode offers Jack, like infinite omniscience or whatever. He goes, "Oh, Jack, you're fine. You're a good guy. You'll do the right thing." And then he's like, "No, I won't. I'll kill who I think needs killing." Jack O'Neill is the guy that needs the limitations. He's the dog that needs the leash, right?
Yeah.
Because if you let the dog off the leash, he's just so broken and full of rage and anger and violence, bad things will happen.
I think that's a good point to make, because one thing, the way I remember Jack O'Neill when I watched this show as a kid, I remember Jack O'Neill as a funny character because he was always cracking jokes and cracking wise and just sort of being snide to everybody. But I think the thing that belies is the fact that he is such a kind of on edge character, and you see it crack through sometimes, especially when people like do stuff that he disagrees with as a leader. You look at the episode where they go to that planet where the people wear the really stupid hats, worship the Asgard. And
I was like, which one?
To be fair, yes, there's many. They're like Renaissance Dutch people, basically, and like they worship the Asgard. And the one of them believes that the one of the like religious leaders on this planet or in this community thinks that the SG1 are like demons or something. So they try to get rid of them. And when they're trying to like fix the sun that they messed up, he has some of his followers destroy the rocket they were going to use to fix the sun, which kills some of his people and some of Jack's subordinates. And Jack almost kills him. Jack, punches him in the face, knocks him on the ground, and then is like holding his M9 to the guy's chest, and he's like, "Why don't I just shoot you right now?" And you see some of that rage come through, because he's not just this quirky guy who likes to crack jokes and sort of stick it to the man. He's also a very serious, like, military guy who's got some bolts, got some skeletons in his closet.
Got some problems, like, and that sort of like snide, fun-loving thing, that's his operating mask, right? That's how he kind of gets through the day. And I bet if you kind of scratch beneath that surface a little bit,
it's like something Cassie says, a little girl that they rescue, in another episode of season 1. She mentions at some point in maybe one of the later seasons, the thing about Colonel O'Neill is that he acts dumb, but he's not really as dumb as he wants people to think he is. So if anything, part of this facade is to try and put people off so that they don't understand how serious he is, because, again, he's very intelligent and he's very serious in many cases. It's kind of an interesting thing they do where they kind of take the serious and no nonsense character that we met in the original movie, which is played by Kurt Russell, and then we sort of tie him into this character that we meet is played by Richard Dean Anderson. And they're not quite the same character, but you can see how the first one informs the second one because it comes through at certain points. Like I said, there's instances where where the Jack O'Neill that Kurt Russell played comes through in the Jack O'Neill that Richard Dean Anderson plays.
Yeah, you could see that difference there from the opening of the movie to the opening of Children of the Gods, where it goes from he's holding a gun to where he's holding a telescope.
Mhm.
Like, that guy's still there, but that guy's more subdued, right? Like
Yeah.
and a cool thing about this episode, there, but for the grace of God, when I'm watching this, the actual mechanics of the storytelling are simple, right?
Yep.
Daniel Jackson steps over the rainbow, sees what Oz looks like, sees what is basically a horrific potential future, and then is able to convince them to send him through the Stargate to help save his world and get back
Mhm.
in time. And which was great. And as I'm watching this, I'm realizing just how much I base the opening of Agency and the Zombie Slayers off of this episode, because the sort of Agency and the Zombie Slayers opens with like people banging on the walls, right? And then just like noises and explosions and things. And a guy who's just like deep in a bunker and is listening to all this stuff and the screaming happen. And he knows they're losing. And this other person is like, hey, here's how you escape into the multiverse. And he says, cool, and then leaves, right? And so I didn't realize how much I based Agent Z off of episode 19 there, but for the grace of God. So in terms of other multiverse properties, what are some of your favorites?
Well, honestly, really, the only one I've ever experienced that really stuck with me was Stargate, because
Yeah.
because it becomes a recurring theme in Stargate. Because later they have these sort of pop up episodes every so often, maybe every couple seasons or once every other season or something like that, where we got to deal with some bullshit because of the quantum mirror or something like that. Because obviously
Yeah.
after there, but for the grace of God, they bring the quantum mirror back and put it in Area 51, and then later on, Alternate Carter and Kowalski come out of it. Um, there's occasional instances where it's like, yeah, let's explore this concept. And again, there's layers to it, because on the one hand, the writers are using it as a storytelling device to be able to come up with some story they wouldn't have otherwise been able to tell, like bringing back Kowalski and long-haired Carter or whatever. But it's, on the other hand, it's also a way for them to do to explore a concept that is cutting edge science, because to a certain extent the multiverse theory is accepted, but at the same time it's also not provable. So it's kind of like, yeah, this is a theory and it makes for a good storytelling device, but we don't really have any way of knowing if it's actually true. So it kind of works on multiple levels of sci-fi storytelling.
Yeah. And to move past this episode, I started watching episode 20 because it shows Daniel Jackson coming back to his timeline, to his Earth. And because the end of There But For the Grace of God has Daniel Jackson, Jack O'Neill finds him, and then he's like, Jack, we're in trouble. And then they get back to Earth, and no one really believes him, because it's kind of a fantastic story. Although, if I'm jetting around the galaxy fighting, intergalactic space slugs or whatever, I'm probably going to be more open to different concepts,
Yeah,
like the multiverse.
it's like
And
that's one thing that kind of gets on your nerves as a Stargate fan throughout the series, where it's like, you're really not going to believe this person when they say something based with all the crap that we've seen just in the last year. It's like, they even hang a lantern on it later on, where it's like, no, I can't remember what exactly the scenario was when this conversation happened, but they say, that something's going on where one person's saying something, and other people aren't sure whether to believe him. And Daniel says, "Oh, come on, we've had weirder stuff than this happen. We've had weirder things than this happen." And Teal'c looks at him and says, "Name but one." Daniel starts rattling off things. It's like, yeah, we get it. They've seen some weird shit.
this should
Why do
not
they
be
not
that much
believe
of a
so?
leap.
Why do they not believe Carter when she says there's an ancient living in her house? Why do they not believe Jonas when he says he can see weird bugs? Why do they not believe Daniel when he says he can see like dead Gould in his closet? It's the list goes on and on.
And you know, it's kind of like back in 2020 when they were like, hey, there's vanishing monoliths and we think there's aliens. And everyone's like, yeah, I'd buy that. I mean, you might as well, you know, like the list of
Yeah,
things that, like, you know,
this might as well happen.
this might as well happen. It said Joe Biden's actually the composition of 15 hamsters that all work together in one mechanized Joe Biden suit. I'd be like, I mean, you know, he's not doing the worst job. So, you know, I'll vote for that set of hamsters again. By God. And during the episode 20 politics, it goes into how there's this senator. I want to say his name's Kinsey. Is that
Yep,
right?
Senator Kinsey, Richard
And
Kinsey.
yeah, he gets in there. He goes, well, this is too expensive. And, you know, we're going to shut this place down. And, you know, we don't
This is the
really need
classic sleazeball politician.
this
Because
press.
as we see throughout the entire rest of the series, as much as he professes that the Stargate program is too expensive, he is benefiting from it at every turn.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, pretty much classic politics. You know, I
Because
want this thing to be shut down because it costs too much money, and yet I want to get all of the dividends that it can give me before I shut it down.
well, he wants to control it, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. He doesn't have full control over the thing. So
Mhm.
he's trying to like push out anybody who might stand in his way, which is just classic fucking sleazeball politician nonsense. Um, and at the end of that episode, they say, "Oh, we're gonna shut it down," and goes into episode 21, which also might be episode 22 in a DVD box set, but we're going off the Amazon Prime
Yep.
listings of it, and it's called "Within the Serpent's Grasp,"
Yep.
which is really a fantastic episode. It's I like it because it's got a unique spin on so many things. There's so many different sci-fi stories where the guy from the future comes back to save the past, right?
Mhm.
I get it. And then he gets to like redo a thing that didn't go well the first time.
Yep.
Cool. And this is similar, but also he went into a parallel universe where time was the same. It's just events were sped up by 6 months. They didn't have all the pieces they needed to prevent the thing from happening.
Mhm.
And it's a direct sequel from it parallels There But for the Grace of God so very well. And they decide, instead of letting the Stargate program be mothballed, they suit up in their black commando outfits. They go to this Stargate coordinates that Daniel Jackson got from the parallel universe, which is the most valuable thing in the world. And then they go through the Stargate, and then they wind up on a Gould ship. Now, how cool is this Gould ship? Like, it's early days, right? But you know, because season 7, 8, 9, 10, they're jet set around on the human ships all the time, not a big deal. But at the end of that season 1, you're like, oh, we're off Earth. This is awesome, you know.
Yep.
And
Very early, not as high budget CG technology.
yeah, and and much like the early MCU, Stargate builds brick by brick. It's very episodic, but also each brick is a story, but all of the bricks, like it's like if you had a wall full of bricks, each brick is a self-contained story, but
Mhm.
they make a greater wall, you know.
Yep.
It's not like
I was thinking of that earlier. That's one thing that I've always liked about Stargate is that even though in most seasons, or really all the seasons, it's episodic where there's like, you know, there's a story of the week. There's
yeah,
also a common arc that goes over the course of the season and over the course of the series, because otherwise you wouldn't have this story progression that keeps the entire series consistent with itself.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it ends this episode 21, Within the Serpent's Grasp, where they're on the Gould ship. They killed the son of Apophis, who is Skara, because the kid was gonna suck out Daniel Jackson's brain. They're on the ship. They've got C4 planted. They're gonna stop the invasion, right? They're gonna and then at the end, the Jack O'Neill's surrogate son is taken over by a Gould, and then the Gould is about to suck out Daniel Jackson's brain, and then Jack O'Neill's like, Scar, don't, and you could see like this pain because his gun has to take the life of another son of his. You know, like holy shit, like just tears falling down my face, Nick. I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, his gun has to kill his son all over again, right? Like there's so much meaning there. And but he shoots him and he kind of frees the boy by shooting him and killing him. And yes, I'm pretty sure he gets rejuvenated in a sarcophagus the next episode. I'm almost
Yep.
bet on it. But still, and it ends with them about with the invasion fleet about to hit Earth, and then you see another ship off in the distance, right? So there's more than one. It's probably three. And so if they did blow up one ship, there would be other ships to deal with. So that probably wouldn't solve the problem if they blew themselves up, because it'll just be slightly harder for the aliens to win.
Yeah.
Right. What are your thoughts on season 1 writ large?
Because from the pilot episode on, they had good solid writing. Like I said, even episodes that didn't quite have as good of a storyline, they still had pretty good writing and character development and motivation, and it fires on all cylinders.
None of these made me think, oh my gosh, why am I watching this?
Yes, exactly.
And I think we can end there. What do you think? Anything else to add on these episodes, or?
Yeah, I mean, we've covered pretty much all the bases. Again, there's the best thing about Stargate SG1 storytelling is that it is so self-contained and it does all it needs to do without really doing stuff that it doesn't need to do.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of extemporaneous crap that you have to cover. And there's some storytelling where it's like, oh, there's subplots. Oh, there's little bits of character development that are going on over here in the C plot or something. Stargate doesn't have a lot of that. It is so streamlined. It's like, I think you said something about it's like something you said about the writing for the pilot. It's as tight as a drum. All of this character development, all of the requisite dialogue, all of it takes place basically in the same plot. They throw in bits that are relevant to what's going on to the overall arc and everything as part of what's going on with the characters as they're just going about the main plot. It'll be like, oh, well, Daniel will say some offhanded comment that reveals a little bit of his character, or conversely reveals a little bit about the arc that's going on as a whole, and it's so well orchestrated that way.
Like in the alternate universe of There But For the Grace of God, when Jack O'Neill and Samantha Carter, Jack O'Neill is like, hey, I'm going to go die now. And he's going to basically sacrifice his life to buy time, and he hugs Sam Carter. I think they might kiss, I'm not sure. And
they just hug.
And Catherine turns to Daniel Jackson and says, oh, are they not engaged in your timeline? And it kind of
no.
Yeah. And it like that plot is kind of there throughout the first season, but it's all very subtle. It's very, it doesn't hit you over the head. It kind of grows real organically, real naturally, like in that episode where they're lost on the ice planet together, and he's like, they're huddling together for warmth, and he's being kind of flirty and fun, but his legs are broken or something, and she's just trying to you can see
them alive and keep them alive.
But you can see the chemistry there, but there's never like in Scrubs when JD and Elliot sleep together, but they're like, oh, but now we have to hate each other. So like mid-season like the mid-season finale of next season, and then it gets weird. It kind of resets and stuff. There's none of that. It's very organic and very natural.
It's not contrived because they're not trying to hit prescribed beats to try and tease the audience. They're just letting it sort of develop, and you can tell the actors are having fun doing it.
Yeah,